All right, we are live. Okay, Mesa. So tell me your understanding of growth and fixed mindset and where you're at with things right now, and the meaning and importance of it.
Okay, so my understanding of a fixed mindset is somebody who is so concerned with what they appear to be good at or not good at. Fixed mindset believes that there's a lot of reliance on natural talent and what you are naturally good at, and that's what you can continue to be good at, and what you're naturally not good at, and therefore you shouldn't try. A fixed mindset would be very threatened with any criticism to an area that they're very strong in, because that threatens their whole self-image that they've been building through the years, as opposed to a growth mindset that sees things as more fluid, and that you may have natural talent in some areas, but you can develop in other areas. There's always room for progress. A lot of emphasis here is on effort, hard work, and finding the right opportunities, the learning opportunities, the mentors, the teachers. Somebody with a growth mindset is more open to feedback, because to them, that's a way of a method or a prompt for improving, and it doesn't attack their self-image as much.
Love it, love it. Yeah. So and as we had discussed in advance, the way I see it is it's really a dynamic between humility and egotism.
Mm-hmm.
And egotism being the addiction to self-image, and humility being more the addiction to self-honesty. And
so you would equate a growth mindset with humility and a fixed mindset with egotism.
absolutely, absolutely. And as we deconstruct it, you'll be able to see the connection between it. And a lot of people, they indulge in egotism and the drama of it because they still think it's a good idea. Deep down, a part of them thinks it's a good idea to do that, to boast, to pump yourself up. And, I've heard it be compared to poisoned honey, that, it might be sweet to the taste at first, but it destroys us from the inside. And so we've got to build a compelling and persuasive argument why it's a bad idea to indulge in addiction to self-image, or the pattern will rule us and enslave us. And so what might be best for you and I today is if we can pretend like we're in a game show, all right? And a game show involving a series of competitive debates. And we have to come up with the most compelling or persuasive argument for each of the topics presented. Okay? And we'll work together as a team. And this has to do with the competing perspectives of growth versus fixed mindset. And we're going to try to show why fixed mindset is not such a great idea. And then we'll just pretend that every time we present a winning argument, we get $1 million, right? Or if money doesn't motivate you, just pretend that, if we get it all wrong, we're going to be, just pretend that if you get it all wrong, everybody you love dies. All right.
Oh, but gosh.
Whatever will motivate or inspire us. But
all right.
Really the level of motivation needed to overcome fixed mindset is actually life or death motivation. And part of the trick of egotism is people underestimate the effort needed to overcome it. And so they never do. People stay stuck in it, and it creates an endless cycle of suffering. So in my coaching experience, it's necessary to bring the motivation to 10 out of 10 in order to actually be effective. The minimal effective dose of motivation is 10 out of 10. If you don't get to 10 out of 10, you'll never really apply enough effort to be successful with this.
Effort seems to be a key word when we're talking about fixed and growth mindset. Would you agree?
Yes. Yeah. And it's really, and when we think of effort, we want to think of the focused application of your free will. I mean, your life is your choice in terms of how you're going to handle it. And really where you apply your effort is going to determine what kind of life you create for yourself. So with a discussion like the one we're going to have right now, it's going to we're basically making a case for, is this worthy of you making it a top priority in your life to apply your effort to this very cause? And I believe that when people have a thorough understanding of everything involved, they will absolutely be motivated to apply whatever necessary effort is needed to be successful and not have the habit of egotism and fixed mindset rule us. So we're going to try to come up with some persuasive arguments and debates. If you want to be persuasive, it helps if you can relate it to how what you're arguing for affects the most meaningful aspects of life. For dramatic effect, you can bring in an awareness of the worst possible outcomes of the perspective you're arguing against, and the best possible outcomes of the perspective you were arguing for. Okay, so what we'll do is I'll just have you go first every time, and then I'll go second, kind of like a tag team. Together, we'll try to create an argument for each. So the first thing is this: when it comes to growth versus fixed mindset, it's all about the competing value of doing the right thing versus looking right. Okay? Humility, modesty, and growth mindset is all about doing the right thing. Fixed mindset and egotism is all about looking right. So for you, what would you say, why is it better to do the right thing rather than focus on looking right?
Well, for the first thing I can think of is self-integrity. There's a feeling that people would have if you're trying to look a certain way, but you're not feeling that certain way, or you don't feel that you've acquired that level, but you're pretending to know something, and it hits on your self-integrity. You start to feel guilty, or you start to feel like you're an imposter, or so I would say peace of mind. That would be the first thing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very honest. It's very honest to just do the right thing rather than look right. And one of the reasons is if we're trying to look good, we may compromise the good of everybody involved for the good of the individual, if looking right is the primary motive. So oftentimes people will make situations worse because they're desperately trying to validate and get recognition, and they can't admit they're wrong on anything. They would rather die than change their mind when people are addicted to self-image like this. And it increases their fear and paranoia because everyone who has a different perspective is perceived as a threat rather than an opportunity to learn. So this is really what I would call villain fuel. If you look at every villain in every movie and story, this is the way they were wired. They were wired to look right. And so they always created the evil of any story and the injustices against people in order that they look good, because that's where this can go. Whereas, you mentioned sort of having integrity. It's really heroic to do the right thing, even if you never get the praise, recognition, or reward for it, right? And so in that creates more of an inspirational example for the people that look up to us. And also, it's actually a prerequisite to looking right. If you do the right thing, you will look right. It's a prerequisite. Whereas if you focus on looking right, then you may compromise doing the right thing, and the logic defeats itself. It betrays its own objective. And so as we focus more on doing the right thing, we become more resilient because we don't have the risk of being humiliated and the need to defend ourselves by managing our self-image. We're just going to do whatever it takes. And when people are more focused on looking right, they can become what's called an emotional burn victim. And an emotional burn victim is somebody who becomes sensitive and touchy and easily offended and gets triggered and has reactions because everything's a threat. Because
and they need compliments, right? They need compliments, and they fear any criticism.
Absolutely. But the thing with the emotional burn victim is they create injustices on everybody around them, but they don't really care because they've compromised the good of the group for what they believe is a necessary ingredient for their happiness. But what's happening is they're suffering false judgment, because what they believe is necessary for their happiness is actually the very thing that's blocking their happiness. But they're in such a state of denial, the spell does not want to be broken. So they'll remain in such a state of denial as to actually address the true cause of their misery and suffering. And the thing is that even if you were to achieve this, if you're to achieve just looking right, like, hey, I look like I'm the smart one, I got the right answer, it's a hollow victory because it's so unstable. It's about a status, and status is in a constant state of flux. Truth itself is always in constant state of renegotiation. A scientist can say, you know, nuts are bad for you one day, they're high fat. And then the next day they're like, well, the studies show there's different types of fat and some fats are healthy. And so nuts are actually a health food. So all of a sudden, somebody who looked right at one point in time now looks wrong. And that's what can happen over the course of time. If we're clinging to that status, it's very unstable. And there's a lot of pressure and stress to maintain that position of looking right. It can be unrealistic to try to keep it up forever, right? So, and it affirms small-mindedness psychologically, because people become insistent on proving their point of view rather than being open-minded to expand their point of view in the best interest of everybody involved. So those are some thoughts on why we should focus on doing the right thing versus looking right. What do you think? Do we get the $1 million on that one?
I think so.
Anything else to add on that? Or good, you want to go on to question 2?
No, it was actually a thought/question. You said that doing the right thing is a prerequisite to looking right.
Mm-hmm.
Can you think of some instances when that's not the case, and that might be a challenge? When sometimes doing the right thing, you run the risk of not looking right, but you do the right thing anyways.
Yeah. So, I mean, there have been times in history when somebody has stood up for the truth and they've been martyred in the process.
Yeah.
And so that has happened before in history, but then later on, the history books show that, you know, this person was actually right. We might have a scientist that says, hey, you know what? The earth revolves around the sun. You know, the earth isn't the center of the universe. And we're like, we're going to keep you stuck in your house for the rest of your life. You know, like, so there have been times when people they've done the heroic thing. They've done what was right rather than just focusing on looking right. But that is it's people like that have helped our whole society progress, because they were heroic enough to face it. Whereas the villains of the time were always the ones persecuting those who were standing for truth. Right? So that's how it's played out in the human story. This is a timeless classic subject as it pertains to the human story. So, question 2, usually what happens is when we're focused on doing the right thing, we're then motivated to find our faults. If we're focused on looking right, we're then motivated to hide our faults. That is the natural flow of tendencies. Okay, so question 2, why is it better to find our faults than to hide our faults?
Well, if you find your faults, if you know what your faults are, you can correct them and you can become a better person. You can grow, and hence growth mindset. Hiding them means you are forever committing yourself to not developing, because you're even hiding them from yourself and from everyone. Therefore, you cannot take any steps to get better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And everyone can see when we're trying to hide our faults, right? Like, we think we're doing a good job of hiding them, but everybody can tell, right? Like, if you're lazy and careless, or if you're moody and temperamental and you lash out at people, everybody sees it. You can't hide it that well, you know?
It's almost like rejecting a diagnosis, right? Like, you're sick and rejecting a diagnosis and doing nothing about it, forgetting that you even have that condition, as opposed to accepting the fact that you have that condition and that there are many, many, many treatment options available, and moving forward, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And to add to that, I would say that, you know, when we focus on finding our faults, it leads to an outgrowth of virtue. If you're focused on finding your faults, you will ask for help instead of denying the very need for help, which is very egotistical, denying the need for help, right? We all know people who are in desperate need of help, but they're completely resistant to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we're focused on finding our faults, we will embrace feedback.
Yes.
But if we're focused on hiding faults, we justify our mistakes when we're given feedback, we make excuses, or we turn the table and we start to blame the person giving feedback, right? And then, you know, if we're focused on finding faults, we will challenge our own thoughts and conclusions and judgments, because that's the right thing to do. If we're focused on hiding faults, we blindly accept our opinions, judgments, and thoughts. That is one of the symptomatic habits, right?
I think
And
also finding your faults makes you humble so that you are more accepting of others' faults. Rather than
yes,
labeling people by their faults, if you've already discovered your own faults and you've owned them, you're more likely to be understanding when you meet people who have flaws, just like you do.
yes. So better social harmony, right? And and as it pertains to these subjects, we talked about asking for help or denying the need for help, right? And when we deny the need for help, it's less considerate of those around us because other people suffer with the consequences of who you're being, right? If you're being moody, then it affects everybody around you. It's like throwing a skunk into the middle of a room. It stinks for everybody. It's actually
Yeah.
very inconsiderate, right? So, and it's a psychological necessity that we need other people to help us find and fix our faults because we all suffer unconscious incompetence, which means that we don't know what we don't know. And we need other people to help us with that. Otherwise, we just keep repeating the same mistakes. Now, one of the things we talked about embracing feedback and justifying our faults and challenging the feedback and not accepting feedback. One of the reasons this is important is because we see ourselves about as accurately as one of those funhouse mirrors. Okay. And the reason is that we don't see ourselves objectively because human beings are more likely to give you praise and flattery because that comes with reward and favor than they are to give you feedback, which comes with a risk of punishment. So, because it's human nature that we know if I compliment you and stuff, I'm in your good books, I get brownie points. But if I tell you the things you're doing wrong and try to give you corrective advice, you're likely to resent me. That human beings naturally do not get a balanced amount of feedback versus praise.
Yeah.
None of us see ourselves objectively. If you want a true reality check, you've got to fight for your feedback. You've got to be gracious. You got to accept it every time. Don't punish people when they try to tell you what you're doing wrong because you will never see yourself objectively. And the way that you know you don't see yourself objectively is that you will become what's called a tortured talent, where things in your life just never seem to work out, where you have this constant sense that your success is blocked. If you've ever felt that way, then this is very relevant to you. If you've ever felt that you don't seem to get the promotions you deserve or the rewards you deserve or the opportunities that you deserve, and you're like, why is my success always blocked? And it's because we don't see ourselves objectively. We always rate ourselves too high. We don't have low confidence where we should have low confidence, where we should be embracing more of a growth mindset because we keep trying to hide those incompetencies from our awareness. So, and we just keep going in the wrong direction on things without admitting it to ourselves. There's a lost opportunity to help other people. There's people out there in our lives that are waiting for the help that only our better selves can provide. When I'm wiser, there's people that I can then help. They're waiting for me to level up. For all of us, that's the case. Once we become more humble and we embrace that growth, then it's almost like we're unlocking the capacity to help greater amounts of people who are suffering right now without the help that only we can provide them. So, and now a lot of people will say, well, you know what? I'm already hard on myself. I'm humble. That is often a trick of the ego. And they'll say, I don't want feedback because I'm already too hard on myself. What happens is the self-criticism is usually coming from a place of thwarted, ego-driven ambition. So people feel entitled to certain levels of success. And when they don't achieve it, the ego gives them the disguise of an inferiority complex, but really they're beating themselves up that they didn't acquire the things that they felt entitled to. And that is a trick. And people will use that as an excuse to avoid feedback. Don't tell me anything because I'm already hard on myself. When I do things wrong, I already beat myself up. No, that's an ego thing, right? When you're humble, you're like, I know I've got more to learn. I've got to catch up to everybody. Better start now, right? So the modest approach is a little bit more self-concerned. So
So you're basically saying that somebody who is just, I'm trying to keep this aligned with fixed and growth mindset, but if a person is overconfident, overestimates their capabilities, their skills, then they're more on the fixed mindset, as well as somebody who's always self-critical. And you're saying that this comes from an egotistical place because it's about self-image. They criticize themselves because they did not fulfill the image that they are hoping to be. That is also fixed mindset. Am I correct in understanding?
Yes. Basically, it means this. The way that this applies to fixed mindset, you're driving to a destination and you're clearly going in the wrong direction and you're beating yourself up because you haven't hit the destination yet. And so you're using that as an excuse to not take redirection from people. You're like, no, I'm already late and I haven't hit my destination. Don't stop me and give me directions and try to turn me around. That's what's going on. They are fixed in their direction. And they will lie to themselves and convince themselves that they're being something that they're not. But that's how this plays into fixed mindset. They're staying fixed in that direction and they're using, well, I mean, people are very clever in their self-deception. They will use all kinds of excuses to protect the ego. And that's one of the ones that people often easily accept. I'm too hard on myself. You can't, don't turn me around. Don't change my directions. I'm already frustrated that I haven't hit my destination, right? It's fixed. It's completely fixed. Growth mindset's like, well, I'm screwing this thing up. So somebody please tell me where I need to make a turn. Where did I make a wrong turn so I can turn this thing around? You know, that's a growth mindset approach to it.
And that's a connection to not really worrying about looking right. Because if you have a growth mindset, you're willing to ask for help and say, I don't know, I need help.
Yeah, you're willing to admit you made a wrong turn. Whereas the consequences, people use the consequences of the wrong turn and the associated sensitivity of it as an excuse to do the work to turn around. That's fixed mindset again.
So again, we keep coming back to effort. And I can't help but see that when you're in a fixed mindset, it's almost like you avoid effort to the max. You don't want to put in effort. You want to go with what you have, with the status quo, with your current skills, with your current image. And there's almost like an aversion to putting in effort, whether it's effort to correct a fault or effort to develop a new skill or effort to introspect, but it's like there's an effort aversion. Am I correct in seeing
Yes,
this?
yeah, absolutely there is. And the reason is that despite all the evidence it's not working out, some part of them still believes it's a good idea. And that part of them is the part that will convince them not to invest their effort towards turning around and changing direction in life. And that's why it's important to create a clear and compelling argument and really get clear on how this is the wrong direction. And what we're doing today is we're really mapping out the territory. We're like, look, there's huge redwood trees here. If we were on course, there shouldn't be redwood trees here. Look, there's all these kinds of like, kangaroos. If we were going to the land we're supposed to head to, there shouldn't be kangaroos right now. We're creating more and more evidence like, hey, are you going to turn around yet or what? And really, all of this evidence is evidence that you're not getting to the destination that you truly wanted. What everybody really wants is real long-term happiness. And you need to get clear that you're actually driving further away from that direction. If you're experiencing increasing frustrations in your life, increasing moodiness, and if you're experiencing suffering emotions, then you're not there. And you need to consider redirection. And that's what growth mindset is all about. It's like, hey, am I willing to take this in a different direction? Right? So another aspect of this that I mentioned with finding faults and hiding faults comes down to our own level of thinking. So a lot of times people will challenge their own thoughts. They'll say, a thought came into my head. Is that the right thought? Or, how would that play out if I did that? And they question it. and they give it some reasonable consideration before accepting it. The other approach is that people will, with a fixed mindset, they tend to come to a thought and they tend to accept it. And so what they'll do is they'll make assumptions. They'll jump to conclusions. They will judge other people and stay firm in that decision. They can't change their mind. They resist a rational redirection in their stance. They'll become more proud and argumentative rather than being open to reconsidering their conclusions. So they usually jump to like quick, careless, clumsy conclusions about things, and then they stick to it rigidly. And we can see evidence of this on social media. You'll see that people are presenting things as though it's absolute truth when it's nothing but opinion or rumor, and they will defend it very passionately. And you'll see that people will just develop false impressions of somebody. Maybe a new teacher starts at a school and everyone thinks they're so nice and so wonderful. And then one person's like, they're fake. They're completely fake. And they stick to that position and they're unwilling to consider anything different. And in this case, they might be completely wrong. This person isn't fake. They're authentically sweet and nice and everything else. But the fixed mindset person will not want to admit they're wrong. They're just so steeped in the habit of egotism and just looking right and being right that they will completely destroy the potential for that opportunity for relationship harmony with a coworker. And that's how it can play out.
Does it come from a growth mindset person, a person with a growth mindset's ability to distinguish thought from their own identity, as opposed to a fixed mindset person who confuses the two? Or I'm trying to understand that. Why can a person observe a thought, entertain it, and then dismiss it, when another would just see that thought as the truth? Is it a lack of distinguishing between I am not that thought came to me, or?
It comes from a level of arrogance, which is a false conviction of wisdom. So people assume that bias is wisdom. They'll be so firm in their bias that they think they're wise, and they get confused, which comes from false judgments. And we get stuck in the habit of delusional thinking and false judgments when we stay stuck in a fixed mindset. We never cure ourselves of it. So once we develop a distorted perception of things, we stay stuck in it. A growth mindset person would be able to recognize the signs that they've developed the habit of false judgments, that they judge things too quickly and they don't study the facts before forming an opinion. A growth mindset person will get out of that lane. A fixed mindset person they'll go down that lane and it becomes an ever deepening hell. And the reason it does it with this part of it in particular is very important, because our thoughts become contaminated. We shouldn't necessarily trust the thoughts that come to our mind. Our thoughts get contaminated by impure motives, irrational fears, biased perspective, negative influences, misunderstanding. And our thoughts are really the byproduct of the ideas that we expose ourselves to with friends, family, social media, TV, everything else. And if you've ever had a song come into your mind out of nowhere, then you know, and it almost pops in like as if we created it in our own head, then you know the power of the subconscious mind to just absorb things and then just spew them out at random moments. And so sometimes a thought will occur to us, but it's really the words of another person that we are exposed to. So that's why we need to challenge it. Just view your brain as like a radio receiver, and different stations come through it. And you got to decide, is this a good station or not?
So would you say a fixed mindset, a person with a fixed mindset views their thoughts as truth, as a reflection of them and their intelligence, as opposed to a growth mindset person who looks at a thought as a thought? It is only a thought. It's not a reflection of my wisdom or my smartness or my thinking. It's a thought that popped in my head. I can reject it or take it.
Yes, yeah. And a growth mindset person, to really boil it down, would go for facts before an opinion. A fixed mindset person would go, my opinions are facts. And we've all experienced people like this.
And does this come, my question is, when people do that, are they aware they're doing that? Are they aware that they're saying my opinion is a fact? Or is it subconscious? The
more that they are in egotism, the more they lie to themselves. The less self-honest they are. That's really the dynamic at play here. It's a continuum between lying to yourself more and being more self-honest. So they'll often, it depends where they are on that continuum, right? But another thing is this, that's really important for this one. True or false, do we have the capacity for really bad thoughts?
Yes.
Absolutely. Every bad thing we've really intentionally done in our life seemed like a good idea at the time, didn't it? Yeah, it usually seems like a good idea, or we wouldn't do it. Whether it was like having that extra glass of wine at night, or whether it was like just hanging out with that one group of negative, bad influence people, or whether it was dating that person, even though there were all the warning signs. We often think that bad ideas are good ideas, and then experience shows us otherwise. And sometimes we think something's a bad idea and we avoid it, and then later on we realize it was a good idea. We might think, oh, if I take this course, well, that would be a bad idea. They can't teach me anything. I can't learn anything. Then maybe later you change your tune. You're like, wow, that was a great course. I loved it. I learned so much. So, and we don't truly know what's best for us. Like a lot of times the worst things that ever happened to us in life, that's when we learned and grew the most. And, you know, we can't isolate the moment. Every moment is connected to every other moment in ways that are beyond everyday awareness. So a lot of times, some of the things that like our greatest challenges and setbacks in life were also our greatest moments of growth. We don't prefer it. We don't like that stuff. We don't like to learn that way, but we don't truly know what's best for us. And we have incredible capacity to accept bad ideas. And that's why we need to challenge our own thinking. Whereas a fixed mindset person will just be fixed once they come up with an opinion and an idea. They're not being modest enough to appreciate their own fallibility, right? So, and I think challenging our thoughts purifies them. So good ideas can stand up against intellectual scrutiny. Okay, who else is involved? Who else is going to be affected by this decision? How am I going to feel about this decision a week from now or a year from now? Like, you know, what else do I need to consider? Like it just reinforces a good idea, which can stand the test. Whereas false ideas and false thoughts get eradicated and exposed. So by challenging our own thoughts, we purify our thoughts. And it also breaks us out of our self-limiting behaviors. A fixed mindset person lives a very robotic life. They wake up, they do their breakfast, they read the paper, they complain about everything that's going wrong in the world. They go to work, they gossip, they get jealous of other people, they complain about injustices at work. You know, they get a little bit temperamental, they get irritated and frustrated a lot, you know, go to bed, repeat, right? Like that's typically the fixed mindset person. They just live a very robotic life. Whereas the growth mindset person is always about smashing through self-limiting behaviors and breaking out of the mold and taking their life on new trajectories, right? So that is, why is it better to challenge our thinking instead of embracing and accepting it? Do we get the million on that one? Everybody we love still lives? Are we good on the game show?
So, I hope so.
Okay, now here's a really important one. What happens next is you go further down, because really it leads to like almost a river or flow of ideas. And it all starts with, do you want to look right or do you want to do the right thing? And the next thing is this. People who are interested in doing the right thing will give credit. People who are interested in looking right will take credit and praise. Now, just at the outset, what are your thoughts on this? Why is it a better idea to give credit than to take credit?
Well, it's the honest thing to do, number one. But I think that when you give credit, you build relationships, right? It's a thank you to somebody who's done something for you. And I think you build, you know, connections with people. It's a way of being grateful and trying to, not sure.
This is awesome. No, you're absolutely right. Those are amazing answers, right? Like you're building strength around you and team unity. you know,
And you
and
build
usually
cooperation versus competition, right? Like there's
yes,
this
yeah,
sense of we did this together.
yeah, and giving credit creates one of the most beautiful moments for a team. That's usually one of the most beautiful moments for everybody, because there's that expression of gratitude. And when you do give credit, other people trust you more and respect you more and are more likely to follow your leadership because you acknowledge their contributions, right? So whereas when we take credit, first of all, absorbing praise, does it make us any better when we absorb praise?
No.
No, in fact, it can make us worse because it can swell up our pride. So there's a risk to hanging on to that. I'm like hot potato with it. Like somebody hands you praise, get rid of it quick. There's no net gain by hanging on to that thing, but there is net loss. So what happens is then you might delude yourself. You might let it get to your head and convince yourself that you're the sole doer and you create the fruits of all your actions. And then you discourage all of those who contributed to your success and haven't been acknowledged. There's social consequences to ingratitude. So what I tell people is this, you know, when you take credit, it strengthens the ego and destroys the team. When you give credit, it destroys the ego and it strengthens the team. What's better? Right? And it's also very karmic for those who believe in cause and effect. Anyone who humbles himself is usually exalted by everybody else. But anybody who exalts themselves is usually humbled because everyone wants to see them fail because they know it'd be good for them. Right? And you mentioned it's very honest. Okay. And it reminds me of an Einstein quote. I'll see if I can find it on my computer. And here's the reason why it's so honest, I think, right? That everybody in society contributes to a success, that everybody helps shape us into who we are. You know, like one reason is this: imagine there were no other beings on planet Earth. What would life be like? Without anybody else, I think I would be like a beast, okay? Living outside in harsh conditions, you know, eating tree bark probably because I can't catch a squirrel. Like it would be a horrible life. I couldn't speak English. I couldn't do anything. Everybody in society has contributed, and any success I personally have is a reflection of the success of countless beings, either in my life now or beings who have gone before me, right? So if I think of something proud, let's say I think of an award I won, all right? There was an award I won 1 year for a company I worked for. I won this award, right? One of the first things I want to do is I want to acknowledge who had to do a good job so I could do a good job. One, did I have to grow my own food? No. Other people in society grew food and made it available, so I didn't have to spend all day long figuring that stuff out. Did I have to like sew my own pants and shirts and clothes? No, somebody else did that for me. And then I was just able to exchange money or value so that I don't get tied up with that kind of responsibilities and distractions. Other people had to civilize me and influence the way I behave. People taught me the language I communicate in. Other people influence the way I think. Mentors, parents, friends, people who have written the books that I've read and absorbed, right? Other people provided the electricity and the plumbing and the roads and amenities needed so I can get to and from work and have a place of work to stay. You know, people invested themselves into helping me be the person I am today. You know, we're connected to everyone and everything in so many ways that it's really difficult to have a clear-cut boundary between the individual effort apart from the whole. So I look at all of creation and all of society as a part of the greater self. So when I do this, really, I start to, at the end of it, I start to think like, really, my contribution to this, my self-importance in this was actually quite small. And we all know that this isn't just relevant to me in that example. There was a guy named Og Mandino, and we all know somebody who, you know, they win an award and they kind of act like it was their thing, you know, like I'm the greatest and blah, blah, blah. And Og Mandino was an author, and he once said that the next time you're tempted to boast, okay, just place your fist in a pail of water. And when you remove it, the whole remaining will give you a correct measure of your importance, right? Which I love because that keeps us humble, which is healthy for us. I have an Einstein quote here.
Yeah.
Albert Einstein, many people would consider him one of the smartest humans to ever live, right? He said, when we survey our lives and endeavors, we soon observe that almost the whole of our actions and desires are bound up with the existence of other human beings. We eat food others have grown, wear clothes others have made, live in houses others have built. The greater part of our knowledge and beliefs have been communicated to us by other people through the medium of a language that others have created. The individual, if left alone from birth, would remain primitive and beast-like in his thoughts and feelings to a degree that we can hardly conceive. The individual is what he is and has the significance that he has, not so much in virtue of his individuality, but rather as a member of a great human society which directs his material and spiritual existence from cradle to grave. Albert Einstein said that. Incredibly humble for somebody that everyone says was the smartest human to ever live. Right? So he's not taking credit. If Einstein doesn't take credit, and if all of the wisdom masters of the past and spiritual masters and all the main things they did, if they were all living humble lives, who are we to start puffing ourselves up of such us people of such inferior achievement, relatively speaking, right?
It's one thing, I think this has been really interesting. It's one thing to give credit to your mentors, to your teachers, to the people who supported you on your journey. And then it's another level to start giving credit, you know, to who built your house, who provided food, because yes, you would not have been able to do all those things had it not been for the so many people that you don't know exist, but have touched your life.
Yes. And what does that do when we start to increase our everyday awareness that your life is really a group project involving all of humanity that's ever lived? Then it gives us more of a beyond the self orientation. So we start to care more about the rest of our community, and we start to behave in ways that are more pro-social. We're not going to litter. We're not going to, you know, break the rules for our own benefits. We're going to do things that are greater for the whole because we recognize and we have a greater sense of gratitude towards the rest of society, right? And I'm sure we could all use more of that in society right now. At any time in society, we could always use more of that, right? So usually what it comes down to is that, you know, when we get down here, somebody in modesty is all about claiming less self-importance. That's what the modest people do. They claim less self-importance. Whereas the person with the fixed mindset is all about claiming more self-importance. That's what's motivating a fixed mindset. It's motivated to claim more self-importance. They're trying to have a fixed value and trying to say that their value is high. Right? So what would be some of your thoughts on why is it better to claim less rather than more importance for yourself as an individual amongst the community?
Well, social harmony.
Yep.
You're gonna, and then one of the things I always think about is how do you want to be remembered after you pass on, right? As somebody who made a difference. If you're able to see how many people have touched your lives, do you not want to be that kind of person who, when you pass on, you've actually touched so many people's lives in a positive way? You cannot do that if your focus is on being important. It will only last for the years that you live, and then it's gone. Nobody's going to look at that. But if you are more about touching people's lives, then that will live on for generations after.
Yeah, and really the legacy of the growth mindset person is really they live to love others. One of the most loving things you can do in your life is to grow into who you were designed to become. The same way that an apple seed is meant to become an apple tree and create goodness and spread out and share even more goodness from more apples and more apple seeds in this positive legacy. Growth mindset is all about that seed growing into the tree. Fixed mindset is just fixing you at your current rate of development. Fixed mindset often is associated with living for self-gratification. Growth mindset often associated with living to love others. Because that's usually the net result of those lives lived.
There's a connection here between the 4 basic needs of humans that you had discussed with me before, that you learned from your Tony Robbins seminar, right? This is significance versus love and connection.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's the desire. It's when people value personal significance that they take their attention off of love and connection. So being most loving and giving to others becomes less of a priority than puffing up the self. So it's all about self-gratification. Like right on the tombstone, self-gratification. Right on the tombstone, lived to love others. Who lived a more inspirational life? This is a worn out story. We've seen this time and time again. These people are easily forgotten, right? These are the people that live on in the hearts of other people. They may not have conquered having all of the fame and glory or anything else, but they conquered your heart. What's more meaningful? So
I have a question here.
Yep.
I'm trying to think about what I think is the answer, but I'm not sure. So we keep contrasting the different extremes with fixed and growth mindset. What we're saying here is that if you have a fixed mindset, you tend to lean towards the need for significance versus love and connection. But is it true to say that every person with a growth mindset is in the love and connection? Or could you also be growth mindset, but still seek significance?
You would be somewhere closer to the middle of the continuum. And the reason is this: if you're focused on doing the right thing, human beings are pro-social creatures.
Okay.
Human beings are pro-social creatures. So the right thing always involves what's doing right for the greater good of everybody involved. So you will naturally, when you go further down that continuum, be led to love and connection. So somebody who displays some elements of growth mindset and some elements of fixed mindset, they'd be somewhere in the middle, right? So that's what I would say usually, because when you start doing the right thing really people come to learn in time is that they never really regret just, living a life in which they loved other people. But they will regret living a life in which they made it's all about me. What's in it for me? Because that's a hollow victory. It doesn't fulfill you. Even when you do gratify yourself, they did a scientific study where they give you money and they say, spend it on yourself, self-gratification. And then they'll say, spend it on other people. And then they measure your happiness. And the people who spend for other people end up being much happier. They like themselves more. We're wired to get psychologically rewarded when we're doing what's good for everyone involved. It is a much better operational method for happiness. If you find your happiness in the happiness of other people, you'll find your own cup of happiness gets filled. You'll find that when you were doing something really loving for somebody you care about, that's when you were really filled with happiness. And you like who you are more when you do that. But when you're looking for selfish happiness, you find it's very hollow and fleeting. And you start to experience a lot of frustrated emotions as a result. So when people are going down this road and they're doing less self-importance, they'll experience more growth in their life. Okay? They'll have less pressure. They have better relationships and they feel more free. When people are choosing egotism, they're claiming more self-importance. It delays their growth. Okay? There's more pressure. And it strains relationships and you actually become enslaved by the ego. It's like you're imprisoned by it. So
I think it comes from a scarcity. I feel like when you're in the significance mode, you're operating from a scarcity point of view where, there's not enough to make me happy. I need praise. I need this. I need this. I need to self-gratify. Whether if you look at the other perspective, there's no scarcity, because if you want to be happy, you just do more, you give more, you help more. You're never going to run out of it. The other perspective is I will run out of it. I don't have enough for myself but if your happiness comes from you doing something, not from you receiving or getting something, then you would never run out because you always have the option to do, to give, to care.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You just experience a more abundant life on every level. Yeah. Now, one of the things that happens after this is that you'll find that the person who has the growth mindset, they tend to judge themselves and look for their opportunities to get better. Somebody with a fixed mindset will get fixated on judging other people. And it's really a trick, because in their own reality, in their own universe, the more they judge and pick other people apart, the more that their perceived relative value goes up. It's like cutting off everybody's head so you feel taller. That is the mindset of that is the fixed mindset perspective. So and where this becomes a problem is, are we ever really qualified to be judging other people? Do we ever really know their full story? No, it's not really. We shouldn't really be judging other people, because once again, it's not really the honest thing to do, right? And we have our own biased perspectives, and when we judge other people, we're sending them the message that they're not good enough, that they're only conditionally accepted, right? And it's not productive. People don't respond well to that. But, if you want to change the world, the best thing to do is change yourself. Leading by example is the most influential way to inspire other people towards behavior change. So it only makes sense, if we want to be productive, that we start by judging ourselves and not others, because judging other people is a way to distract the focus from our own growth opportunities. And so fixed mindset people will get caught up in that game because they're trying to lower everyone else's value. And growth mindset people are like, no, I've got a lot to learn.
I think that as humans, we're wired to make judgments. We're wired to spot good behavior, bad behavior, label it as something good or bad in our minds. I think the difference is if you start turning that inwards and doing that inwards, you become aware of your own faults, and you start to become more humble, understanding that, I'm trying to be a good person, but I still can't help it. I'm doing this. And so when you do encounter the judgments you make on others, as they will come, you're more likely to say, I bet he's trying to change. I bet this is something that he's struggling with, like I'm struggling with this. So you're likely to dismiss the judgment, but it will happen, what I'm trying to say. But I'm just saying that if you're a fixed mindset, if you're not doing this for yourself, I don't want to say fixed or growth mindset, but if you're not turning it inwards, then you're likely to just accept these judgments as fact.
Yeah.
And end up feeling really good about yourself because you've never done it inward. So you must be amazing because you can't see any of those judgments. You're just turning it outwards. Whether when you turn it inwards, I don't think you become oblivious to what's out there. You just become more aware, more understanding, and more forgiving, because you realize that even you, who's trying to be a really good person, have all these flaws.
Yes, you become more compassionate.
Yeah.
With a growth mindset, right? We can become very callous when we have a fixed mindset, because our survival mechanism, and that in human nature, there's a lot of different thought habits that are human nature that aren't very virtuous, right? And that's why it's important to challenge our own thoughts. Don't just blindly accept them, because you wouldn't just marry the first person you go on a date with. Like, don't marry the first thought that shows up in your head, because it might be based on an irrational fear that, if people realize how phony I am, I'm going to become an outcast. So I better try to create a story that somebody else is a phony. Let me see who I can judge. It's a defense mechanism that's feeding usually an irrational fear. And that's why we shouldn't just accept our thoughts, because we might become the slave of irrational fears. Mm-hmm. Right? Even though it doesn't make any sense. Like, it's just a bad idea to go around just judging other people. And what it leads to is this. So on the one side, you're going to judge yourself and look at your opportunities for improvement. That's not self-abasement or negative affirmation. This is being very honest, right? It leads to the habit of admiring other people. On the other side, it leads to the habit of resenting the success of others rather than admiring the success of others. When we're growth mindset, we're all about admiration, and we admire it and we appreciate it because somebody has set an example, and they may be, their success leaves clues for us. And so we can learn from them what's possible, and maybe we can directly learn from them how to be able to achieve what they've achieved. That's more the growth mindset. Fixed mindset is I want what they have. You know, why doesn't it never work out for me? And it invokes more a spirit of competition than a spirit of cooperation.
Mhm.
Now, this one is a very important one. And the reason is that everybody thinks it's okay to be jealous. Like it's just, oh, I'm jealous of this, I'm jealous of that. Okay. But that's like, you know, one small match can burn down an entire building. And one small indulgence in jealous thinking can lead to complete possession of a spirit of evil. And this is how it works. You start off with a little bit of jealousy, okay? You want what somebody else has. Then over time, that can progress to resenting them a little bit. So now you kind of resent the other people that have the success and the glory and gain that you wanted for yourself. Then it progresses to hating them for having what you want and just a bitterness and a mean spirit towards them. Then it progresses to actually liking misery and pain being inflicted upon those persons, where you take delight in it. You're like, I see that, you know, they got hit by they got in a car accident. Now they have to pay all this money, like, ha, ha, ha. And they actually start to enjoy it. Or they create like rumors and stuff and try to sabotage somebody because they enjoy it. Enjoying misfortune against other people is the definition of pure evil. The Germans had a term for it, Schadenfreude. It means like a liking for evil. You know, it's like people who see somebody, a big example of this is you watch a YouTube video, somebody is like skateboarding and they fall and hurt themselves really bad and you take delight in it. Like when you really think about that, that's not virtuous. To enjoy and take pleasure in the misfortune of others. And so jealousy, even a simple little jealousy, creates an access point for the greatest spirit of evil to enter your life. And so it's a really big deal to be able to catch that and just have a high standard on not tolerating jealous or envious thoughts when they show up in our head. That's why we need to challenge our thinking, because it doesn't end there. It progresses. It builds a life of its own until you become a villain, because villains enjoy inflicting harm and evil on others, and they take delight in that stuff. Any thoughts?
While you were talking, I was thinking, so what makes someone, you know, see someone who's so much better than them and admire them, and what makes someone feel threatened and want what that person has? And I think it comes from the difference that one person is seeing things as a means of hope. If he can do it, I can do it. Yeah. There's an abundance there. There's this, you know, if he can be successful, I can be successful. So there's hope, there's abundance. And again, there's effort. I'm going to have to work really hard to do what that person did. And then contrast that with the way the other person's thinking. There's a lack of hope. There's a fear that happens. Like if he did that, I didn't do that. And there's that threat because there's that scarcity mentality. Like we can't both be really successful and famous and good at what we do. If he got there first, then I'm too late. And there isn't that willingness to expend effort to try to mimic that. There's that, oh no, he's there and I'm not. And so there's this panic attack. So I can't help but think of like abundance versus scarcity, hope versus fear, and willingness to put in effort and effort aversion.
Yeah. And I love what you're describing there, is that really on the one side we have hope, which is certainty that positive possibilities can happen, right? On the other side, we have what I call negative faith, which is an absolute certainty in the most negative of outcomes. Like, oh, I could never achieve that, so I'm just going to hate them for having it, right? So it's actually negative faith versus hope is a dynamic that's really at play there. So when people become very just cynical and they get stuck in that, they'll turn to jealousy and envy as just a natural symptom of their cynicism and negative faith. And that's usually because they don't appreciate and value the concept of growth and growth mindset. So they turn to negative faith to soothe and they feel safe that way. They
Mhm.
actually feel like that's a necessary ingredient in their happiness. They're like, well, it's not going to work out anyway, so I got to be careful for negative eventualities, so I have to be super risk adverse in order to be happy in life. So that's the operating method that they function under there, for sure. Now, and the other thing is that people with a growth mindset, they assume they will conclude, I am the problem when things don't go according to plan. Fixed mindset, they conclude everyone else is the problem. The problem is outside of me. Because to assume responsibility for the problem would lower your perceived social value, and they consider that a threat. So somebody with a fixed mindset is more apt to just blame everybody else and not acknowledge their own responsibility in anything that goes wrong. Why do you think that's a bad idea?
Because then you're not in charge of your life. If you're placing all the power on everyone, then everyone around you controls what you can achieve, what kind of life you live, because you're a victim of the circumstances and the people around you. I think accepting ownership means that you get to steer your life. You get to say, no, that's not okay with me. I'm going to change. No, I don't want that. I will do this. So it's about owning your life and giving ownership to everything around you.
Yeah, and you're right. You can't control what others do necessarily. The only way forward here is to take responsibility. That's the only way forward. Take personal, extreme ownership, right? Because that's what's best for the group mission. If everybody takes extreme ownership, then there's greater chance of success for the entire group or team involved. But if people start blaming, I mean, if you're in the military, the book Extreme Ownership, Jocko Willink, he talks about this. People's lives are at risk. So the best attitude for everybody have is extreme ownership. I am responsible on anything, because they don't want to risk that things go wrong because the person responsible didn't own up to it, because lives are on the line, right? So it leads to the greatest chance of success for everybody if everybody takes extreme ownership. It's the considerate thing to do for those who depend on you in life. That is the considerate and loving thing to do. The selfish thing to do, self-centered thing to do, is to blame, right? And it's also honest, because we can always find our own personal responsibility in any problem. Even if it's a lack of seeing the problem in advance, a lack of managing your own expectations, a lack of training people how to treat you and how to conduct themselves. And the truth is this, like, at the end of the day, the actual truth is that we are the source of our problems, because problems require relativity. And it requires this sense of I as an individual. Without a sense of I as an individual, there's nowhere for anything to be registered as a problem. So if you completely dissolve this sense of I and ego, and I know that sounds like a more advanced concept. If people don't understand that, that's fine. It's something to think about. But if there's no sense of I, there's no problem. So next thing is this. The person with the growth mindset, they inspire respect. The person with the fixed mindset demands respect. What do you think is better and why?
Well, definitely inspire respect, but I can't help but see this as very related to taking credit and giving credit. When you demand respect, you are basically saying, I am owed credit, give it to me. And so the funny thing is, if you are feeding off this credit because it makes you feel good, how much does it make you feel good to know that you were given it unwillingly, right? It's almost like, I can think of like dictatorships, where people are required to salute the leader and praise the leader. I wonder, like, does that make them feel good to know that you've basically ordered people to treat you that way, to give you that way? Does it even mean anything? Or does it mean so much more when it's given willingly, when it's earned and out of people's free will?
Absolutely, absolutely. And an example of this is, a business director who says to their team, look, I want you to agree with everything I say, whether I'm right or not. Like anyone who sends that message. And, you know, you can't really demand sincere respect. If you demand it, you often get phony respect, right? People will mentally rebel against your entitled demand. You know, behind your back, they'll despise you, mock you, ridicule you, even though to your face, they're like, yes, yes, I know you're going to blow up in my face if I don't treat you with super amounts of respect, and everything you say is holier than thou, and blah, blah, blah. So if somebody's ruling with an iron fist, this is what they do.
Mhm.
But it's also, when you rule with an iron fist, it goes over like a lead balloon, doesn't it? Right? Like there's no longevity to that style of leadership. I think demanding respect is kind of like having a pet raccoon in the house. You know, it's high maintenance. You know, you got to keep your eye on it. You know, it's going to get into things. It requires supervision and attention, and things are still going to get messy. Okay. Like you can't keep a pet raccoon in the house. You can't demand respect. It doesn't work like that. And it also looks childish and ignorant. That's how it looks and how it comes off to other people. Right. And when we do that, you know, it leads to an outgrowth of other terrible vices. It leads to anger, and it leads to, you know, faulty judgment and greed, and all these other vices become outgrowths of it.
Again, there's that focus on looking right? If you demand respect, then you know you're going to get respect because you've demanded it. And so if you're getting respect, then you look right in the eyes of others. You look like you are being respected.
Yeah, you're getting the thing you always wanted anyway, but you're just getting it through the proper channels, right? Now, the last point of discussion, really, number 12, would be, why is it better to have the perspective that goodness comes through me rather than the perspective that goodness comes from me? Because that's two different sides of the coin. Now, this is very advanced level growth, fixed mindset, humility, and egotism. So not everybody will be there yet on this one. This would be one of the more final steps in the process. But why do you think it's better to have the perspective that goodness comes through me?
So just looking at it linguistically, when you say through me, you're a middleman.
Yep.
Right? There was somebody who gave you something and now you're passing it on. Mm-hmm. So you see yourself as part of a whole, as part of the society, as a means, right? Like you're this tool that is passing on something to someone. If you say from, then you assume that you are the starting point. You are the originator, the creator, which is false, right? You did not, and that goes back to being grateful, like our whole conversation about, you know, we don't live on our by ourselves in this society. We are part of the society, and you know, we are the food we eat, the houses we live in, somebody's contributed to that. So when you start to see things as through, you really start to see that you're actually so small, you know, and your contribution is small, but it can have a really big impact. But in the end, you're part of a whole, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's a more inspiring example, but it also gives immunity against ego too, right? If you don't consider yourself the starting point, the creator of goodness, the root source, then how can you develop an ego? You can't. You're just a hollow tube or a channel for something greater that's even beyond yourself as an individual. And there's a wasteland of wasted lives that were disappointing and fractured because people assumed that they were the source of all goodness. They refused to get help. They refused to listen to people. They let things get to the head. They thought the rules didn't apply to them. They demanded respect. You know, they wasted the opportunity to grow into who they might have become. It's like an apple seed that was just laying on a rock. It never really germinated. It never really grew into its higher potential. It remained fixed in that state, like a psychological fossil or a psychological antique. It just remained in that state. That's a tired and worn out storyline. I think a lot of people have gone from just being a little egg. We've all gone into a big journey. We were all just a single-celled egg at one point, okay? And now look at us. That's been one heck of a journey to go from a little single-celled organism to what we are now. Now that we're here and we have the choices and opportunities we have, are we going to squander it by following the storyline script of so many wasted lives before us who took the fixed mindset, egotistical approach? And is that even an honest approach? You know, does all goodness come from people, or you know, to be spiritual, does all goodness come from the creator of goodness, the creative source itself, whatever you want to call it? And you can call it a higher power, you can call it the universe, you can call it God, divine mother, Allah, any of those terms, it all works. It's all the same thing, right? Who are we disregarding if we say I am the source? And one of the things to think about here is that, you know, from a spiritual level, and that's where this story goes, this lesson ends up at a very spiritual finale and conclusion. You know, at a spiritual level, if you really want an exciting life, you really have to erase the ego. Because how can a higher power work through you if it's all going to go to your head and it's going to grow your ego? You have to be able to be humble so that you're a risk-free tool that a higher power can work through you to bless other people, right? And to be a source of blessings for others, which is one of the greatest sources of fulfillment.
Would you agree that that is always going to be a work in progress? You are never going to get rid of your ego and be done with it. There will always be ways in which the ego will try to creep back in.
Sure,
and
it
you
does.
will have to continuously discipline your thoughts and your beliefs and about yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I believe you're right. And I believe that, you know, non-essential desires will get us time and time again to going back into the other path. The non-essential desires, whether it's desire for money, or whether it's desire for fame and recognition or anything else. For many people, we've seen them go backwards. They don't stay on course. Staying on course is another virtue in itself. And that's where the ego gets us, because we overestimate our ability to succeed. We think, we convince ourselves that we can, through our willpower, we can withstand negative influence. We convince ourselves of that. But the truth is that environment is more influential than your willpower. But sometimes people have to be humbled by that realization. They think, I can still hang out with all my negative, arrogant friends. It's not going to rub off on me. And it's no, your mental diet, you're going to start absorbing it. And the minute you notice it, that's the tip of the iceberg. That means you're already incredibly contaminated. So because of the ego, we will underestimate the effort needed for lasting healing change. And we overestimate our own ability. We underestimate the need to stay reminded of this. Just as though we get dirty living in the world and we need to shower, we also need to cleanse these egotistical grime that will cling to us in a very subtle, delicate, gradual manner. And that stuff stinks. When somebody's conceited, to me, that's more repulsive than any body odor. Wouldn't you agree? So I think having a certain level of humility hygiene is a requirement to stay on the path. And for me, I found it's more than people think. To me, it's a twice a day thing. If you're living in the world, you can just fall under this hypnotic spell of making it what's in it for me. It's all about me, and the desire to puff up your self-image. All of that stuff can get to us, right? But this is really a deep, deep battle. It's more than just growth versus fixed attitudes when you're in a workplace culture or a team culture. Like, this goes right to the complete depths of spiritual destiny, right? Because thinking you're the source of goodness is really pride. And pride is what, you know, in the ancient biblical stories, pride is the original sin. Pride is what made the devil, the imagined sense of self-created greatness, right? And so what forces are you colluding with if you're indulging in toxic pride? You know, then you're going to develop envy, and you're going to like evil against people. Okay, you're going to create injustices on people around you. You're going to indulge in greed and lust, which is sexualized greed. And all of these different vices, it's an access point for all of it. It gets in through fixed mindset, addiction to self-image. People will say, and I've heard this term before, that ego is edging God out. And that's really where this path takes us at the end. that it's really much bigger than people realize. Like, this is the battle of your life. We know too often we're majoring in minor things in life. We're concerned with sports scores, and we're concerned with what's my Bitcoin at today, and all these other different minor distractions. And we don't realize the battle of our lives is going on every time you decide whether you want to do right action or you want to be and look right. That is the battlefield of your life. Everybody is the hero in their own life story. And this is the timeless, classic battle. You've come a long way to be here. And this is really the call to adventure, to take up sword and go into the battle with the ultimate victory being realizing who you really are and who you can become, and giving a life that is the greatest gift and legacy to those you love. Because when you're better, everyone else is better off.
I want to summarize from my perspective. I feel that we've contrasted the fixed and the growth mindset. And if I wanted to summarize the thought, the main thought that a fixed mindset has is, it's fixed, right? I am perfect as I am. I'm not going anywhere. I'm in my place. Like, there's that, I'm good as I am. In fact, I'm perfect as I am. So they tend to blame, they tend to take credit, not want to put in effort because they're perfect as they are. They don't see their own faults. They're operating from a scarcity mentality, from a fear mentality. If somebody else is saying I'm perfect too, then they start to feel threatened. Are they more perfect than me? Or do they seem more perfect than me? They're more focused on looking right and being significant, as opposed to a person with a growth mindset who does not see themselves as perfect as they are. They see themselves as work in progress. I'm a work in progress. I'm developing every day. I'm trying to get better every day. So by saying that, they already acknowledge that they're not perfect. So they're already aware of their faults. And they know that in order to get better, they're going to have to put in effort. And they realize that if they're doing that, other people are probably doing that. So there's this abundance and this hope and this admiration for anyone who's done this before. This is a person I can learn from. They're more inspired to do right than to look right. And they take ownership and responsibility for their lives.
Yeah. And to sum it all up, it's the difference between, if your fuel in life, your fuel that moves you forward can either be fear, which is fixed mindset. That's a fuel and it can move you forward, but it can lead to vehicle problems up the road. Or you can choose love, which is doing the right thing. And love can get you the greatest mileage and move you forward, as we've discussed, and give you the best journey possible and take you to the destination. It's really a love versus fear dynamic.
Fear and love?
Yeah.
Or is it fear and hope? Or could it be sometimes this one or sometimes that one?
It would come down to love versus fear, and love is a consideration for the greater whole, right? What's the most loving thing to do? The most loving thing you can do is embrace a growth mindset. What does a fear-based mindset do? It sticks to the fixed, which is more of trying to maintain a status. Now, what might motivate somebody to choose love is hope. Hope might motivate them. The certainty that it's going to work out in the end. If somebody has negative faith, they will feel that it won't work out if I do that. So I'm going to stick to the fixed mindset. Positive faith is hope. Negative faith is going to be fear, right?
Yeah.
So that's really, if we wanted to boil it all down, it's like, do you want to be on team love or do you want to be on team fear? What team would you rather play for? What team has a better win-loss record? You know, what team is more fun to play for? What team is going to appreciate you? You know, what team do you belong on, really, at the end of the day? What team have you always wanted to be on?
What team is at more peace and what team is generally enjoying their lives a lot better? What team will be remembered?
And I think, you know, a lot of people are living and they're very intoxicated with fear. And I think the important thing to recognize is that there's such thing as wise caution. Okay, we all want to take wise caution, and we all want to avoid non-essential risk. That's a virtue called prudence, when you think ahead, okay, what could go wrong with the situation? What could go wrong with me? What could go wrong with people? You know, and how can I take preventative action steps? If you could be prudent, then that is really what we want to transmute that fear into, taking action so that we can move forward with wise caution, right? But when people just indulge in fear, they tend to focus on the things they can't control. They tend to
Yes.
focus on everything that they've got working against them. They tend to focus on the certainty of negative outcomes. They tend to embrace irrationality, right? They'll fear things that are incredibly unlikely and cripple their opportunities as a result. We all take calculated risks in life. Every time you get in a car, I think it's something like 1.2 million people died every year in car crashes. But we all take calculated risks in life. But the key is to actually focus on the virtue of prudence if you want to be able to carefully manage the risks in life, rather than letting it be fear, which is almost like a distorted version of prudence, of virtue, which is all about minimizing potential risk. But that's why
I think that a lot of times we can get caught up in trying to control things that we can't control. I find the Serenity Prayer to be really grounding. And I think it's something that a lot of us, you know, need to ask ourselves on a daily basis. So the prayer is, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think for many of us, the wisdom part is the part that's a little bit lacking, right? We try to control things we can't control. We ignore the things that are actually in our hands. So to actually, whenever you're frustrated, to really boil it down to, what can I do about the situation and what's out of my hand? And then just to take action where you can. I think that can be really freeing.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, one thing to do when it comes to freeing yourself from the grips of fear, and fear is what will drive us to the fixed mindset, is get very clear on exactly what it is, because a lot of times people have a decoy fear, right? And so they will fear something on the surface. You know, maybe you fear not having the answer in a business meeting, but really you have a fear of the unknown and fear of loss of control, right? So, you know, get very clear on what the fear is, and then ask yourself, how irrational is this fear? Because a lot of times we accept irrational fears. I had a coaching conversation with somebody who was well into their late 70s, and they had a fear of birds since they were a young girl. And then I said, okay, well, let's talk about it. How is this fear irrational? You've had a fear of birds for like 70 years. What exactly do you think will happen? What would the worst possible outcome be? She's like, oh, no one's ever asked me that before. I've just been fearing them. But I guess if I'm to, ultimately, what am I afraid of? That it'll peck out my eyes. And I said, great. How many times have you ever heard of that actually happening to a living human by a bird? She's like, well, none. And I'm like, well, where did you develop the judgment that this is a possibility? She referenced some Alfred Hitchcock movie that she watched one time when she was growing up. I'm like, great. So like the 6-year-old self made a life rule and you've never questioned it, right? And you've denied all evidence that that rule was wrong. You're letting a 6-year-old run your life. And then I said, you know, like, so we talked about it, and she's like, you know what? She's like, why didn't anyone ask me the questions you're asking me now? She's like, I've been fearing birds my whole life. You're right. It doesn't make any sense. What the heck am I afraid of? I'm like, you never questioned that thought. You were a slave to that thought your whole life. And we were kind of laughing about it, that she just didn't question it and was a slave to it. And that's what fear does. So ask yourself, what's irrational about this? Also, ask yourself, where is the love and support? A lot of times we fear because we might think, oh, well, if things don't work out, I'm going to end up broke and destitute. And it's like, yeah, but even if you end up broke and destitute and out on the street, strangers are going to come in and help you. There's support programs. There's people in your life that'll come in and give you the shirt off their back to help you out. Don't deny the existence of love and support in your life. When you're in fear, you're denying the existence and awareness and acknowledgement of love and support. So when you're in fear, you just think, where's the love and support for this? Then you focus on what you can control. What can I control? I control what I focus on. Okay, let me focus on the opportunities to learn here. What can I learn about this situation? Let me focus on the learning lessons that's trying to unfold here. And what are all my opportunities? What are all my resources? Maybe I can focus on that and unpacking some of that. And then you can focus on, what you want to do about the situation, or you focus on everything you got going for you, right? Which helps give greater courage. Well, when I'm 10 out of 10 motivated on something, I have a great success rate. I got lots of people in my network. I can Google whatever problem it is, focus on everything you have going for you, and then focus on your plan of action. And if you do this, you can develop ruthless courage, but it requires form in thinking, just in the same way you learn good form in the gym. And if you don't, you get aches, pains, and you don't get results. We need to learn good form in thinking. The problem is it's harder to spot people when it's all going on up here. That's why we need other people to help us find and fix our faults, because other people can recognize your thought habit and be able to prescribe something to correct it, a corrective of perspective that you may not be aware of. I mean, most people out there, they're under spells of suffering that they don't even know about. People that are suffering egotism, they're not even really aware of it. One of the biggest signs of it is denial itself. Right?
I was just going to ask you a question about that. That's my final question for you. You mentioned earlier, and you just mentioned again, that when someone is stuck in egotistical thinking, they're in denial. What's your best advice for people to snap out of that?
I would say this. I would encourage you to love them anyways. If there are people in your life that are suffering and they're unwilling to change, love them anyways. They deserve more, not less compassion because of the fact they're doing that. And we've all made mistakes.
My question is not advice for me looking at people who are egotistical. What would your best advice be for anyone listening to this? Whether they're in denial or not, whether they're growth mindset or fixed mindset, what's your best advice for people to start moving in the right direction? What is something that can help people become more aware? I guess I'm asking. I'm not sure what the answer is.
It all starts with self-awareness, because self-awareness leads to self-regulation. So have a check-in with yourself every day. Are my thoughts right? Are my actions right? The way you'll know if you're doing things wrong is if you experience suffering emotions. If you experience suffering emotions, you're doing something wrong. If you experience suffering emotions, if you want to imagine your life like a game, you want to be able to hang on to your inner peace, like hanging on to a football till you get all the way to the end zone. If you're fumbling your inner peace, then something's amiss. And you need to challenge yourself to be able to hang on to your inner peace. Because when you hang on to your inner peace, you're going to be able to be the best version of you for the people you care about, and you're going to be able to be the rock star of your life. Imagine your life like a movie. Which character do you want to play in the scenes of your life? Do you want to be that villain that always makes it about themselves? Do you want to be the hero that's able to maintain that self-control and be able to sprinkle love and wisdom wherever you go? Who do you want to be in this story? Decide, make the choice, and then check in with yourself to make sure you stay on script. But imagine your life like a movie. Decide who you want to play. We need villains because villains add to the glory of heroes in life. You can't appreciate really fair, nice people in your life if it were not for the contrast of all the unfair, mean-spirited people. Okay? It's an implicit ally in the whole process. So, I'm a big fan of, it's okay if people want to do things the wrong way in life. It makes for a sweeter salvation if you suffer. So when people turn their lives around, they just appreciate where they get to so much more. So suffering can be a ripening factor for change. And if people are suffering that you care about and they're not willing to change, it's like a GPS. It lets you know you're off course. But the thing is that people will suffer so much before they become more open-minded. A fixed mindset person, they'll either take the long way or the short way out of it. But typically, if they suffer enough and they hit rock bottom, that's when they become open to considering the growth mindset approach. But do you want to take it that far? Do you want to hit rock bottom first? Hit literally the end of the road before you decide, okay, I'm going to turn this thing around now. Maybe I had the wrong directions. Or do you want to pay attention to the road signs that let you know that you're not going in the right direction for your life? Right? Either way, you're loved and accepted. No judgment. Who cares? We're all just doing the best we can with what we know.
I love how you brought in so many different angles on the growth and fixed mindset. Like, I feel like I want to go back and read some of the chapters in the book and just see it through a different lens. So to summarize, we looked at the lens of being egotistical versus the lens of humility, right?
Mm-hmm. And I would say humility is the key to power. It's one of your superpowers and my superpowers and everybody watching this call. It's like the superpower's there. Are you going to use it? It is really the key to power in your life.
Mm-hmm.
So,
all right, Brendan, this was so wonderful. Thank you for giving me 2 hours of your time to do this.
I thought we were going to go 1 hour, but hey, we got chatting.
Yeah, this was wonderful. Thank you so much, for breaking it apart, for doing the video, for sharing all these introspections that I want to sit with. I actually wrote them down as we went through the 12 points, and I feel like I want to sit and just think about it and maybe do a little bit of self-awareness myself and see where I stand on those.
So it's like this. It's like you've been given medicine to heal, but now you have to take your medicine. You have to take it in the right dosage. So maybe deeper reflection and journaling, and you have to take it in the right frequency, maybe constant reminders and constant check-ins in order for it to heal you. The ego will make us think that the dosage and frequency needed is less than what it really is. It's a twice a day thing if you really want healing change and you want to be free of the drama of the ego game. Just think of wisdom like medicine, get the dosage and prescription right. And other than that, for anybody who's watching the call that stuck it out with us all the way to the end, as we are here today, this chat was a gift of love to you. Because if you've made it to this call all the way to the end, then unlike everybody else who wants to be better, you're actually doing something about it. And that makes you heroic. And even though you're not here with us at this moment, I feel like we're all connected in spirit. And in many ways, we're a part of your team. And strangers care about you. We may never meet, but we care about you. We know the universe of emotions you're experiencing in life. We know how confusing life can be. We all showed up in this dimension not knowing who we were and what we were before we got here. That's like trying to figure out how to fly a plane in midair and struggling with the controls and the turbulence. But we're all better when we hold hands and stick together in the journey of being a human being here on earth at this time. And just consider us part of your team, here to support you and believe in you no matter what. And you have nothing but our utmost love and respect. Go team.
Thank you, Brendan.